Before diving into this profound exploration of sacred sound, I want to share a single revealing truth. What you hear in this moment is only a fraction of the cosmic symphony that has been playing since the dawn of time. The sounds that shape our reality, both heard and unheard, carry within them the very codes of creation that ancient masters understood as the primary language of the universe. Have you ever wondered why certain sounds can instantly transport you to another time and place? Why can a simple melody bring tears to your eyes, or why the resonance of a temple bell seems to vibrate not just in your ears, but in the depths of your very being? What if I told you that sound isn't merely something you hear, but rather something you are? That at your deepest level, you exist as a complex arrangement of vibrations, a living harmony seeking resonance with a greater symphony of existence. The ancient Egyptians knew this. The Pythagorean mystery schools understood this. The Vedic sages encoded this wisdom into their most sacred texts. And today, after millennia of this knowledge being hidden, suppressed, or simply forgotten, modern science is rediscovering what the ancients always knew. Sound shapes reality at its most fundamental level. Dear seeker, this is not just another video about sound healing. This is an invitation to journey beyond the veil of ordinary perception, to explore how the vibrational architecture of creation has been understood and utilized by initiates across time and culture. I invite you, not as a passive viewer, but as a fellow traveler on this path of remembrance. Your soul has known these truths before. Perhaps that's why you're here now, drawn by frequencies beyond conscious awareness, called to reclaim this wisdom that belongs to all who seek to understand the deeper harmonies of existence. Today we'll explore temples, where priests and priestesses used specific vowel sounds to restore divine harmony within the human body. We'll decode the mathematical mysteries that Pythagoras discovered when he realized that numbers themselves were the hidden language of reality's song. And we'll venture into the science of how specific frequencies can literally reshape matter, alter consciousness, and heal the body's energetic pathways. Are you ready to listen with more than just your ears? To feel these ancient teachings resonating within the chambers of your heart? To remember what your soul has always known about the sacred power of sound? In the next half hour, we will traverse magnificent terrain, both ancient and futuristic, outer and inner, scientific and spiritual. Here's what lies ahead on our journey. First, we'll explore how the hierophants of Egypt discovered the healing power of vowel sounds, using a practice called toning to manipulate vibration as medicine for body and soul. Then, we'll decode Pythagoras' revolutionary discovery that all of reality could be understood through harmonic ratios, revealing why he taught that the universe sings, and how his followers believe that every celestial body creates its own unique tone in the cosmic symphony. We'll venture into the sacred science of Sanskrit mantras, where specific sound frequencies were precisely mapped to energy centers within the human body, creating a technological system of transformation that predates our modern understanding by thousands of years. As we bridge ancient wisdom with modern discoveries, we'll explore the fascinating science of cymatics. How sound literally shapes physical reality into geometric patterns that mirror the very mandalas and yantra designs found in spiritual traditions across the world. Finally, you'll experience practical demonstrations of how to use your own voice as an instrument of healing and transformation, learning specific toning techniques that ancient mystery schools reserved only for their most dedicated initiates. This is not merely information to be consumed, but wisdom to be embodied, vibrations to be experienced. The ancients understood that true knowledge must resonate within, not simply be understood intellectually. The story begins where many great mysteries originate. In ancient Egypt, along the life-giving banks of the Nile, Around 5,000 years ago, while most of humanity was still developing basic civilization, the Egyptians had already established an extraordinary understanding of sound as medicine. In their temples, specially trained priests and priestesses were masters of what we might call vibrational healing. They understood that when the human body becomes ill, it has fallen out of its natural harmonic resonance. Disease was not seen merely as a physical ailment, but as a musical problem, a dissonance in the symphony of the individual. Using a method called toning, these Egyptian sound healers manipulated vowel sounds through precise control of breath and voice to produce therapeutic vibrations. They knew something modern science is only now rediscovering, that specific frequencies could restore harmony to the body's energy centers. Acoustics scientist John Stuart Reid has conducted fascinating research in Egyptian temples, discovering that their architecture itself was designed to amplify and channel specific healing frequencies. When you create a particular sound in these sacred spaces, he found that one particular frequency will leap back at you, what modern science calls the prime resonant frequency. But this wasn't unique to Egypt. Across the Mediterranean, another profound tradition of sound wisdom was emerging through the work of Pythagoras in the 6th century BCE. While today he's primarily remembered for a simple theorem about triangles, his true legacy was far more profound. Pythagoras discovered that the entire universe could be understood through musical ratios. The story tells that while passing a blacksmith's forge, he noticed how hammers of different weights produced different tones when striking the anvil. This led to his revolutionary experiments with the monochord, a single-stringed instrument that revealed the mathematical relationships underlying all harmonious sounds. By manipulating string tension in simple ratios, 2, 1, 3, 2, 4, 3, he discovered the octave, the fifth, and the fourth, the fundamental intervals that would form the basis of Western music for millennia to come. But for Pythagoras, this wasn't just music theory. It was cosmic revelation. These same ratios, he believed, governed the distances between planets, the seasons, colors, and even human emotions. Meanwhile, in ancient India, a parallel tradition was developing around the science of sacred sound. Sanskrit, perhaps the oldest language based on pure sound and vibration, encoded profound vibrational wisdom in its very structure. Each Sanskrit syllable was understood not merely as a symbolic representation, but as an actual vibrational force that could affect consciousness and matter. The primordial sound, Om, A-U-M, with its frequency of 7.83 Hz, was understood as the fundamental vibration of the cosmos itself, the same frequency that modern science has identified as the Schumann resonance, the electromagnetic pulse of our planet. What's remarkable is how these diverse traditions, separated by vast distances and without modern communication, arrived at strikingly similar conclusions. That sound is not just something we perceive, but a fundamental creative and healing force in the universe. The first great revelation these ancient sound masters share with us is that sound precedes form. In virtually every spiritual tradition, creation begins with sound. The word, the logos, the primordial vibration that manifests all things. In Egyptian cosmology, the god Thoth, Hermes to the Greeks, created the world through the power of his voice. In Vedic tradition, the universe emerges from the cosmic sound, Om. In the biblical tradition, in the beginning was the Word. These aren't merely poetic metaphors, they're describing a profound understanding of vibrational reality that modern physics is now confirming. Cymatics, the study of visible sound vibration, provides a striking demonstration of this principle. When sand particles or water are placed on a plate that is vibrated with sound, they don't arrange randomly. Instead, they form geometric patterns of remarkable complexity and beauty patterns that change as the frequency changes. What's astonishing is that these patterns often resemble the sacred geometry found in mandalas, yantras, and temple architecture across cultures. The flower of life, the Sri Yantra, the seed of life. These sacred patterns may actually be visual representations of specific sound frequencies that the ancients could perceive directly. The Pythagoreans took this understanding further, developing what they called the music of the spheres, the concept that celestial bodies, through their movements and relationships, create a cosmic harmony. While inaudible to ordinary human ears, Pythagoreans believed this celestial music could be perceived by the soul once it had been properly purified through mathematical and musical training. The Pythagoreans believed that everything which existed had a voice, and that all creatures were eternally singing the praise of the Creator, writes one scholar of their tradition. Man fails to hear these divine melodies because his soul is enmeshed in the illusion of material existence. This leads us to the revelation that sound isn't just something external that we hear. It's the fundamental nature of reality itself, including our own being. We don't just perceive vibration. We are vibration in human form. As we venture deeper into this mystery, we discover that the ancient understanding of sound wasn't just philosophical, it was technological. These traditions developed precise techniques for using sound to alter consciousness, heal the body, and even influence physical reality. The Egyptian priests knew that specific vowel sounds, when properly intoned, could activate and balance the body's 7 primary energy centers. Edgar Cayce, while in trance states, spoke of these Egyptian practices, describing how priests used 7 distinct vowel sounds to energize and harmonize what we now call the chakra system. This knowledge wasn't shared freely. In the Pythagorean mystery schools, students underwent years of silence before being initiated into the deeper teachings about sound. Why such secrecy? Because they understood that sound carries power that could heal or harm depending on how it was used. The deeper mystery reveals itself in what modern science calls brainwave entertainment. Our brains naturally synchronize with external rhythmic stimuli, including sound. Different frequency ranges correspond to different states of consciousness. Delta waves, 0.5 to 4 Hz, correspond to deep sleep and healing. Theta waves, 4 to 8 Hz, to meditation and creativity. Alpha waves, 8 to 14 Hz, to relaxed awareness. Beta waves, 14 to 30 Hz, to active thinking. Gamma waves, 30 to 100 Hz, to heightened perception and spiritual experiences. The ancients knew that by producing specific sound frequencies, they could induce particular states of consciousness. This wasn't mysticism, it was applied neuroscience, thousands of years before we had the technology to measure brain waves. Consider the Sanskrit seed mantras or bij mantras associated with each chakra. Modern measurements have found these sounds vibrate at specific frequencies. Lam, root chakra, 256 Hz VM, sacral chakra, 288 Hz RAM, solar plexus, 320 Hz YAM, heart chakra, 341.3 Hz HAM, throat chakra, 384 Hz OM, third eye, 426.7 Hz. Consider the Sanskrit seed mantras or bij mantras associated with each chakra. Modern measurements have found these sounds vibrate at specific frequencies. Lam, root chakra, 256 Hz VM, sacral chakra, 288 Hz RAM, solar plexus, 320 Hz YAM, heart chakra, 341.3 Hz HAM, throat chakra, 384 Hz OM, third eye, 426.7 Hz. These aren't arbitrary assignments. These specific frequencies resonate with the actual vibrational qualities of these energy centers within the human energy field. But how did ancient yogis determine these precise frequencies without modern measuring equipment? This points to their profound capacity for direct perception of vibrational reality, an ability that most modern humans have lost. The deeper mystery is that these ancient sound technologies weren't just theoretical, they were practical tools for transformation. Pythagoras discovered that the 7 musical modes of the Greek system had specific emotional and psychological effects. He once encountered a young man driven to violence by jealousy, further agitated by a musician playing in the stirring Phrygian mode. Pythagoras asked the musician to switch to the slow, rhythmic spondaic mode, immediately calming the youth and preventing violence. This understanding extended to healing as well. In both Egyptian and Greek traditions, specific musical modes were prescribed for different ailments. It wasn't simply about making patients feel better emotionally. They understood that specific frequencies could restore proper function to organs and systems within the body. Let us now bridge this ancient wisdom with practical application. How can we integrate these profound teachings into our modern lives? How can you, watching this now, begin to work with sound as the ancients did? The simplest and most powerful tool is your own voice. Vocal toning. The sustained expression of vowel sounds requires no special equipment, can be practiced anywhere, and carries the unique energetic signature of your own being. Here's a simple practice drawn from these ancient traditions. First, find a quiet space where you can be undisturbed. Sit comfortably with your spine straight, allowing the breath to flow naturally. As you inhale, feel the breath filling not just your lungs, but your entire being. As you exhale, allow a single vowel sound to emerge naturally. Start with the sound AH, as in father, the most open vowel sound. This vibration resonates with the heart center, creating an expansive quality that can dissolve tension and open emotional blockages. Allow the sound to sustain for the entire length of your exhale, noticing where you feel the vibration in your body. Try this now. Take a deep breath, and as you exhale, intone ah. Feel how the vibration fills your chest cavity, how it seems to radiate outward from your heart center. Now, let's practice a sequence of vowel sounds associated with different energy centers, moving from the base of the spine upward. For the root chakra, intone the sound UH, as in cup, feeling the vibration at the base of the spine. The Sanskrit seed mantra here is LAM, pronounced LUM. For the sacral chakra, intone U, as in you, feeling the vibration in the lower abdomen. The Sanskrit seed mantra is VAM. For the solar plexus, intone OH, as in go, feeling the vibration in the upper abdomen. The Sanskrit seed mantra is RAM. For the heart center, intone AH, as in father, feeling the vibration in the chest. The Sanskrit seed mantra is YAM. For the throat center, intone I, as in light, feeling the vibration in the throat. The Sanskrit seed mantra is HAM. For the third eye center, intone I, as in day, feeling the vibration in the forehead. The Sanskrit seed mantra is OM. For the crown center, intone E, as in see, feeling the vibration at the top of the head. This connects to the highest frequencies of consciousness. Practice each sound for 3-5 minutes, observing how the quality of your awareness shifts with each vibration. This isn't just about making sounds, it's about becoming attuned to the subtle vibrations within your own energetic system. Another practical application comes from the Pythagorean tradition of musical harmony. Pythagoras identified specific musical intervals that produce particularly powerful effects on consciousness. The octave 2:1 ratio creates a sense of wholeness and completion. The fifth 3:2 ratio generates a feeling of expansion and growth. The fourth, 4:3 ratio, promotes stability and grounding. Modern sound healers have created music based on these harmonic principles, often using the frequency of 432 Hz as a reference point rather than the standard modern tuning of 440 Hz. Many believe that 432 Hz resonates more harmoniously with the natural frequencies of the human body and the earth itself. You can integrate this wisdom by seeking out music composed according to these ancient harmonic principles for meditation, relaxation, and healing purposes. Or more simply, become more conscious of the sounds you surround yourself with, recognizing that every sound you hear is literally shaping your physical and energetic body. As we expand our understanding beyond the practical applications, a transcendent perspective emerges, one that reconnects us with the cosmic dimensions of sound. What the ancient traditions understood, and what quantum physics now confirms, is that at the most fundamental level, reality is vibration. Everything from subatomic particles to galaxies exists as waveforms of varying frequencies. The solid world we perceive is an illusion created by our limited senses interpreting these vibrations. The Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, finds perfect expression in the science of sound. The same mathematical ratios that create harmony in music appear throughout nature in the spirals of galaxies, the arrangement of leaves on a stem, the proportions of the human body. This isn't coincidence. It's evidence of a unified vibrational field that structures all of creation according to harmonic principles. The ancient Egyptians, Pythagoreans, and Vedic sages weren't just developing techniques for personal healing or transformation. They were cultivating a way of perceiving and participating in the harmonic structure of the cosmos itself. When Pythagoras spoke of the music of the spheres, he wasn't being poetic. He was describing his direct perception of how planetary movements create vibrational patterns that influence all life on Earth. The Pythagoreans believed that once the human soul was liberated from the bondage of the lower world with its sense limitations, the music of the spheres would again be audible as it was in the Golden Age. This perspective transcends the individual focus of much modern sound healing. It reminds us that our personal harmony is inseparable from universal harmony. When we work with sound for healing or spiritual development, we're not just affecting our individual energy field. We're participating in the greater symphony of cosmic evolution. As one ancient text puts it, harmony recognizes harmony. And when the human soul regains its true estate, it will not only hear the celestial choir, but also join with it in an everlasting anthem of praise to that eternal good controlling the infinite number of parts and conditions of being. This transcendent perspective invites us to move beyond seeing sound healing as just another wellness technique. Instead, it becomes a path of remembrance, reconnecting us with our place in the cosmic symphony and awakening the dormant capacity to perceive and create through vibration as the ancients once did. As our journey through the hidden cosmology of sound draws to a close, I invite you to listen, not just with your ears, but with your entire being, to the symphony that has been playing since the beginning of time. The same creative vibration that sets the stars in motion continues to pulse through your veins, resonate in the chambers of your heart, and whisper through every cell of your body. The ancient hierophants of Egypt understood that sound was the bridge between worlds, between the seen and unseen, between matter and spirit, between human and divine. The Pythagorean initiates knew that numbers were not abstract concepts, but living vibrations that structured reality itself. The Vedic sages encoded in Sanskrit mantras, the very frequencies that could awaken the dormant potentials of human consciousness. And now, this wisdom returns to us, not as esoteric theory, but as living practice. In an age when humanity has separated itself from the natural harmonies of the earth and cosmos, these ancient sound technologies offer a path of reconnection and remembrance. I invite you to become more conscious of the soundscape of your life, to recognize how every sound you hear and every sound you make is literally shaping your reality at the most fundamental level. Begin to speak, sing, and tone with awareness of the creative power carried by your voice. Listen for the subtler harmonies beneath the noise of modern life. Perhaps most importantly, I invite you to reclaim your birthright as a vibrational being capable of direct communion with the cosmic symphony. The ancient masters weren't superhuman. They simply cultivated capacities that remain dormant in most modern humans. Capacities that you can reawaken through dedicated practice with sound. As you continue your journey beyond this video, remember the ancient Egyptian understanding that the renewed harmony and rhythm of the human body, emotions, and mind is the foundation of all healing and spiritual evolution. Remember the Pythagorean teaching that harmony recognizes harmony, and that the path to wisdom lies in aligning your personal vibration with the greater harmonies of the cosmos. The cosmic invitation is this: become an instrument through which the music of the spheres can play once again in this world. Allow your life to become a living expression of that primordial harmony from which all creation emerges. As your awareness expands beyond the limitations of ordinary perception, you'll discover that you've always been part of this eternal symphony, and that your unique tone is essential to its perfect expression. The ancients left us not just techniques, but a vision of humanity living in conscious resonance with the harmonies of creation. In reclaiming this forgotten science of sacred sound, we take a vital step toward realizing that vision once again. The vibration that created the cosmos continues to resonate through you in this very moment. Listen, remember, and allow yourself to become one with the eternal song